something, say something.
Great.
Okay,
All righty.
we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, so I don't have any specific topic today. What would you like to talk about?
Communication.
Communication. Let's talk about communication.
Yeah, communication is really, obviously, one of the most important things that you want to develop skill in.
And it's a universal truth.
And it's universal truth. Being able to communicate well with your children and with your spouse and with your employees and with your clients is a situation that you want to really develop. It's a process. It's a ability you want to develop. And communication has a lot of elements to it. So many elements. One element, of course, is understanding your body language. 70% of our communication with people is through our facial expressions, our body language, our tone of voice, and 20% maybe is the words. A lot of people tell you it's even less.
So 70, 20, the other 10?
The other 10 is, I think there's an emotional content which people pick up on. And maybe it's even more important than 10. Maybe it's 20 and the words are 10.
So emotional context, actually.
Yeah, emotional context.
Wow,
Right?
I never heard
Yeah.
of that one, actually. Okay, that's
Yeah.
good.
So, in fact, my grandkids watch a program and all of the characters just grunt and speak gibberish to each other. But the kids can follow the storyline because of the activities that are taking place in the body language of the cartoon characters.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like, obviously there's communication going on. The kids are enthralled and they can't understand a single word because there isn't any intelligible words being spoken. So there's 100% communication through body language, which is the cartoon character, facial expressions, and the activities that they're engaged in. So I've talked to an awful lot of people that are in a business where communication is really important. School teachers, professors. A professor at Northwest University. She invited me to a couple of her classes. And communication between a student and a teacher is really important. And her body language was saying the exact opposite of her words. You know, it was really, it wasn't inviting at all. So people get distraught and get very frustrated when they received a mixed message. And sometimes you want to give a mixed message. You want to have an aggressive body language in a very gentle tone because you want to shake a person up. You know, it could be a little child, it could be an employee. So you'd be aggressive in your body language, leaning forward, a facial expression, and you might do something like, I was really upset about that situation. And so that's a consistent, I was really upset about that situation. But if you did something like this and said, I want to really thank you for taking the lead on that project. It's a like, the impact is much, much greater because the body language isn't consistent with the verbiage.
Wow, so there's a cognitive dissonance where
Yeah.
What you're hearing is smooth, calm.
Right.
Your body language is aggressive.
Correct. And it's going to be the other way around. You could be aggressive, but smooth and calm. It's like, you could be, I was really upset with how you handled that situation. You're very casual, and am I in trouble or what's going on? And so you get people's attention. The hardest situation in marriage happened this morning with my wife and I. She didn't get my attention. I just woke up, and she started down a path that was very, she was distraught about, and she didn't have my attention, so I didn't give her the attention because
you were not aware. She didn't get your attention.
I was aware a few seconds into the situation, but
Then, too late.
yeah, we've been around together a long time, so. So, well, if you're not going to listen to me, I got to go. So, So, but it was obvious that there was an issue. So, communication, being able to develop, and that's such a small communication skill. There's so many bigger issues to talk about, but body language, I tell people, buy a little book on body language. There's hundreds of them out there, and practice it. Get in front of a mirror and practice facial expressions. So you want them almost always, except for rare instances where it's done on purpose, you want to almost always be consistent with your body language and your content so that people don't get cognitive dissonance. That's a good technique to be able to use when appropriate, and so you got to practice the body language, because body language is more important than your content. It's way more important, and body language includes your tone of voice and your facial expressions.
Because it communicates your intent versus the exact message you're trying to bring.
Yeah, people don't care what you know until they know you care, and they know you care by your body language. They really do. It's open and suggestive. So body language is a subject we could talk for an hour about, but we don't need to because there's so many good books out there on body language, facial expressions, and people underestimate, that are even in sales, they're supposed to be good communicators. They underestimate the importance of body language. For salesmen, it's being attractive. You need to be attractive. One of the 5 A's of being a good salesman is being attractive. And to be attractive, it's not necessarily you're attractive in the sense of being good looking. It's attractive in the sense of the way you dress, the way you comport yourself, the way you conduct your conversation, so that people are attracted to you. You're an attraction to people.
As opposed to being a distraction.
Correct. Some of the most successful salesmen people are attracted to them because they have a little idiosyncrasy. They might wear a bow tie, or they might not wear socks, or whatever. For the really good salesman, there's always a little feature that makes them attractive to people. So, communication style and communication ability is extremely important, whether you're doing it with a client or you're doing it with a child or whether you're doing it with a spouse. And in our world generally of a man's world, or a business world, I guess. It used to be called a man's world. I guess that's not politically correct anymore, but the business world. First thing you need to do is understand what communication style you're attempting to achieve with the client or the wife or whomever. And this is some stuff I learned at Stanford a couple years ago, which I thought it's not mine. In fact, pretty much everything I'm telling you is not mine. I picked it up somewhere else.
Too, right? They
I picked it up
from
somewhere,
somebody
yeah.
else who picked it up from-
Right.
Yeah.
But there's three types of communication, and you should know which level you're dealing with when you're talking to a client. And I've been in so many situations where people have no idea that they've slipped from one to another, and they're now in a different phase, and it's detrimental to them achieving any kind of result. So the first most gentle phase of business communication is influence. And I think that in a marriage relationship and in a good client professional relationship, whether it be a doctor or a financial advisor, you want to be influencing the person you're talking to. You want to have an influence. You want to be able to bring something to the table that makes them interested in being with you. I want to be with you because not because you're influential, but because you can influence me. You're a smart guy, you know a lot of stuff, and I enjoy being with you because you influence me. People want to be with people that they feel bring value to their life. And how do you bring value? You influence them. The other methods that you could fall into so that you get some context of what I'm trying to talk about is you could try to persuade somebody. So you can influence them, you can persuade them. And if you can't persuade them, then you would negotiate with them.
Is that a three?
Yeah.
Influence,
Persuade,
persuade,
and negotiate.
negotiate.
Yes. And and in a marriage, you will go through all three, but you have to be, and in any relationship, you can go through all three, but you have to know where you are consciously in your communication style with the other person, or you're going to cause ruffled feathers. There's going to be unintended dissonance. So I'll give you some examples. Influence is explainable as having a content that the other person finds attractive and wants to implement. Persuasion is a situation where they don't feel comfortable with the solution that you've presented, and you have to show them the flaws in their thinking or the logic in yours and discover their emotional touch points so that they will come around to a different way of thinking. And negotiation is when a person's already made up their mind. They've already figured out what it is that they want. And the only option is for you to give up something to get something. And you have to agree that neither one of us is going to get everything we want. We're going to come to some compromise, and we are going to negotiate a solution. You're not going to influence me, or you're not going to persuade me that we're going to spend Christmas and Thanksgiving at your parents'. That's just not the right solution. So let's negotiate some kind of solution that's we both have to give up something. We both have to talk to our parents
So
because
what
we
you're
don't
saying
get
is-
all of what we want.
So what you're saying is persuasion is, would you say it's time-based persuasion is influencing is very early on in the discussion, and then persuasion comes next, and then once the person makes up their mind, if it's different from what you're envisioning, then negotiation comes in. So it starts out with influence and may end with negotiation. Would that be correct?
In the context I think you're talking about, yes. But basically, you need to do discovery in the beginning parts of your conversation to find out what the other person's position is. So you need to do discovery so that you know which phase that you're going to be talking to your spouse about. Say it's a new subject that you just been married and you've never talked about buying washing machines. Let's just say.
Which we just did, so.
So you don't know where your spouse's position is on washing machines. So you do some discovery, and there's a lot of factors to consider: size, noise level, price, and you might have a desire to have a really quiet one because it's a small house and the baby will wake up, and the other person might be very concerned about only want to loading it once because they want a bigger one or a smaller one, and price comes into the situation. So it's a situation where you're going to negotiate your needs, and you're going to do it in a friendly way because you know it's a negotiation. You don't try to persuade her. See, a lot of problems, what will happen is you'll try to influence them. Well, if you loved me, you'd buy this. That's, the woman might say that, or the husband might say. So that's an influence, and that's not going to work. And you might try to persuade, well, look, I know all about washing machines. I studied up on them. I read Consumer Reports. You try to persuade them that you know what's going on, and this is a negotiation situation. And if you go into it ahead of time, realizing that, we're just going to negotiate. You've got some things that are important to you. I got some things that are important to me. You're going to end up with a lot more comfortable solution than if you try to use a different methodology. That's where negotiation is the first choice. And it's not the first choice. Influence usually is the first choice in some emotional situations.
So wait, so you're saying discovery, so you do discovery as a way to determine whether you should influence, persuade, or
negotiate. Right, yes. Yeah, and I try to use a very simplistic case where negotiation is just, you don't know anything about it, you talk about it, and you say, you get her, what's important to her, and she should find out what's important to you. Price is the most important thing to the guy, maybe. I don't know, maybe quietness is the most important thing. So what's important? So you go into it discovering what's important to the other person, what characteristics are important, what characteristics are important to you, and maybe you will end up, the negotiation will be really, really easy. Maybe the negotiation becomes very difficult because price is extremely important to one person, and quietness is extremely important to another, and you just can't buy a cheap one it's quiet enough. So bring in other characteristics, and you start to, but it's strictly a negotiation. There's no emotional content.
So
or
what you're saying is, if the person has not made up their mind, then influence is your preferred approach, and if they've already made up their mind, then negotiation is your preferred approach. Is that correct?
That's pretty fair. I had a very good set of statements that determined which method you would want to use. And it went something like, I'll have to think this through for a second. If a person doesn't know, and they're not right, then influence is a great way to go. If a person does know and they're not right, then you want to persuade. And if a person knows and they're right or not right, it doesn't matter. If a person knows what they believe, then you have to negotiate. So if a person doesn't know and they're not right about what they're talking about, or they are, if they are right but don't know, you probably don't have to influence them because they're going to do what it is. But if they don't know and they're not right, then you can influence them because they'll listen to you. And if they know but they're not right, then you have to persuade them because they're not right. And if they know the subject and they know they're right, then the only option you have is to negotiate.
I see, so it's whether they know
Or don't know.
or don't know.
Yeah, and of course they have to have a relationship with you where they're comfortable listening to you.
Right.
But you can influence people that don't know. And you can't influence people that know. I know what I know, and I'm not going to influence you. I only can persuade you.
Know as in knowing what they want, actually.
Knowing what they want, or knowing the facts, or knowing the truth. And you end up in some places where people know facts that are wrong, so now you have another issue. But they know. Internally, from their perception, they know. Or internally, from their perception, they don't know. Whether it's right or wrong or not is irrelevant. Whether the facts are, whether what they know is true or false, whether they believe the world is flat. Back in the day when people believed the world was flat, they knew it was flat, and so it was, you had to negotiate with them. Well, let's go discover. They knew. They knew the world was the center of the earth. And today it happens, people know stuff, what they know is wrong. It's just they don't know it's wrong. But they know, you have to deal with people from where they're at, not whether it's right or wrong.
So know as in they've made up their mind.
Correct.
Reached a conclusion.
Correct.
So that's what.
Yeah, they know. Internally, their position is, I know. I know this. And your position is, well, you know this, you're 12 years old, and you know it, and from your perception it's right, but there's a lot you don't know. And, the little piece you know is right, so, and that's the problem. As you get more mature and more sophisticated, people are right where they're at. That what they know works for them, except there's a bigger world out there. There's a bigger box. There's a bigger universe, and what you know is right for that little piece, but it's not right for a bigger situation. So when people know, then you have to negotiate. Well, look, I agree with you. What you've said is correct based on where you're at. Can we try something? Are you willing to go with me and take a little trip and see if we can expand your view? Yeah. Then, that was right there, but this is right. I see. So you have to negotiate. You can't influence them. Well, I'm your grandfather, so I know. So let me, why don't you believe me? That's a lousy way to try to influence. But basically, you try to influence. Or you try to persuade them. Look, I'm a lot older than you. I've been around. Listen to me because I know what I'm doing.
I see.
Yeah, you try to persuade them, and that's not going to work either. So you have to negotiate with the 12-year-old. But it's not a bad thing. It's not like you're giving up something. You just have to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the other person. And if you take yourself out of it and think about what is going to be beneficial for the other person's understanding of the situation, then you'll use the right technique. So, and influence is very, very good, but you have to be an influencer. You have to have credibility. You have to have a place in their life where they want to let you influence them. And that's another whole story. So anyway, you've got this situation where influence is really, really, really important. If you love people, you're always going to want to be influencing them. You're really always going to want to be influenced, because sales is a form of influence. And I have a saying, you should always be selling. And people, when I tell them that, they get really, you'd always be selling. That sounds so crass. But if you really love people, you'll always be selling. And I'm going to tell you why that is, because I think it's a very valuable position to be in with people.
So selling in the context of
I'm going to explain it.
influence, impact?
Yes, influence, exactly. Because selling is a form of influence. If you move out of influence into persuasion or into negotiations, you're not selling. You are selling in the sense of the word, of the big sense of the word, but you've not doing right by your client. You don't negotiate with clients or except with their permission, or spouses except with their permission, where you both know that you're in the negotiating. We're negotiating about a washing machine, okay? And it should be very clear, as I said one time about telling my son, we knew what steps we were in our conversation, because we talked about it. And it makes the conversations go really, really well. So a lot of people I meet say, oh, I hate salesmen. I hate being, I don't like salesmen. I think sales is a bad profession. You're trying to convince people to do something. And when you're trying to convince people to do something, you're probably talking about manipulation. Manipulation is, as I've told you before, manipulation is trying to convince someone to do something that you want, that you think's good for you. Sales is helping a person get convinced that they should do what they want to do. A couple has just spent 4 hours in a car dealership. They walk into the salesman's office. It's highly likely they want to buy a car. They've been there 4 hours. So they've made an emotional decision. They emotionally decided, I'm buying a car. It's the salesman's job to help them go from what's in their heart to make it a logical decision, make them comfortable with it. Because now there's a connection between their head and their heart. A good salesman is always looking at a person's heart and trying to help them take what's in their heart and put it in their head so that they're comfortable with implementing what their heart desires. And that's what a good salesman does.